On a chilly November evening in 2024, United Airlines Flight 1729 lifted off from Chicago O'Hare, bound for Paris, slicing through the dusk over the Atlantic. Among the 150 passengers settling into their seats was a woman in her early 30s, tucked into 21C by the window. Her name was Elena Harper, but no one on board knew that. Dressed in faded jeans and a plain navy sweater, her auburn hair tied back in a loose bun, she blended into the hum of the cabin. For 3 hours, she hadn't uttered a word, not to the chatty retiree in 21B, not to the college student in 21A blasting music through her earbuds, not even to the flight attendant offering drinks. Elena just pointed at a water bottle, gave a faint nod, and turned her gaze back to the endless black outside. The attendant didn't think much of it. Some people were just quiet on long flights. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe she was lost in thought. The retiree, a guy named Harold with a penchant for small talk, tried to break the ice. "Long haul to Paris, eh? You traveling for work or pleasure?" he asked, flashing a warm smile. Elena glanced at him, her eyes calm but distant, and offered the smallest shake of her head. No words. Harold waited, expecting something more, but nothing came. He tried again. First time in France. Another faint head shake. Then her eyes returned to the window. Harold got the hint she wasn't interested in chatting. He shrugged, pulled out his crossword puzzle, and left her alone. The college student, Mia, noticed Elena's stillness too. Something about her felt heavy, like she was carrying a private sorrow. Mia wondered if she'd just lost someone or was reeling from a breakup. She'd seen people like that before, the ones who built invisible walls around themselves. Deciding not to pry, Mia turned up her music and let it go. 2 hours into the flight, the cabin had settled into that familiar airplane hush, some passengers dozing, others glued to their seatback screens. A flight attendant, making her rounds, noticed Elena still staring out the window, her posture almost unnaturally still. "Ma'am, can I get you a snack? Another drink?" the attendant asked, leaning in slightly. Elena turned, met her eyes for a split second, and shook her head with a polite but guarded expression. The attendant felt a flicker of concern. This woman seemed so withdrawn, like she was trapped in her own world. But with a full cabin to tend to, the attendant moved on, dismissing it as just another quirk of air travel. What no one on that plane could have guessed was that Elena Harper wasn't just another passenger. For the past 8 years, she'd been a pilot with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, a Night Stalker, of the most elite helicopter pilots in the U.S. military. She'd flown MH-60 Blackhawks into the heart of conflict zones, dodging enemy fire in pitch-black nights, delivering SEAL teams to targets where a single miscalculation meant disaster. She'd landed on jagged mountain ridges in Afghanistan, navigated blinding dust storms in Iraq, and pulled off rescue missions under conditions that would break most pilots. Her steady hands had saved countless lives, her instincts honed by years of high-stakes operations. But none of that showed now. To the passengers of Flight 1729, she was just a quiet woman in a navy sweater, blending into the background. Elena had learned to keep her past locked away. Years of classified missions had taught her to stay silent, to deflect questions about where she'd been or what she'd done. Even now, on leave to visit family in Paris, she found it easier to say nothing than to risk small talk that might lead to questions she couldn't answer. Silence was her shield, her way of staying invisible. She wasn't rude, she just didn't see the point in chatter that led nowhere. 3 hours in, the cabin was calm, the hum of the Boeing 737's engines a steady backdrop. Harold scribbled in his crossword, muttering about tricky clues. Mia had fallen asleep, her head resting against the window. Elena, still awake, scanned the cabin out of habit, her trained eyes catching details others missed: the slight dip of the wings in mild turbulence, the subtle shift in engine pitch as the pilots adjusted thrust, the confident strides of the flight attendants. Everything seemed routine. Then, a sharp ding from the cockpit pierced the calm. Another followed, urgent. 2 senior flight attendants rushed toward the front, their faces tight with worry. Most passengers barely noticed, but Elena's body tensed, her senses snapping to attention. She'd seen that kind of movement before in war zones, when seconds separated life from death. The lead attendant disappeared into the cockpit, then reappeared moments later, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. She grabbed the intercom, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there's a doctor on board, please identify yourself to the crew immediately." The cabin stirred. Whispers rippled through the rows. A woman in her 50s, a pediatrician, stood and hurried forward. 5 agonizing minutes passed. The doctor emerged, shaking her head, speaking urgently to the attendants in hushed tones. Elena couldn't hear the words, but she read the body language. Something catastrophic was unfolding. The attendants huddled, one on the verge of tears, another glancing at the passengers with barely concealed panic. Then a voice cut through the tension, deep and commanding. "What's the situation?" A man stood in first class, tall, broad-shouldered, with a buzz cut and a presence that screamed military. He strode toward the attendants with purpose. Elena recognized the posture immediately. "Special forces, likely a SEAL." The lead attendant whispered to him, her words too quiet for most to hear, but Elena's trained ears caught fragments. "Both pilots. Severe food poisoning. Captain's out. First officer fading. Autopilot holding, but..." The man's face hardened. He turned, scanning the cabin with a gaze that sized up every passenger in seconds. Then he broke protocol, raising his voice to address the entire plane. "Listen up. We've got an emergency. Both pilots are down. The plane's on autopilot, but that won't last. We need someone who can fly this aircraft. Now." Panic erupted. A woman gasped. A man cursed under his breath. Mia woke up, her eyes wide with terror. The retiree, Harold, gripped his armrests, his face drained of color. The SEAL's voice cut through again, sharper now. "Anyone with flight experience, pilots, aviation background, anything, speak up." Silence. Dead, terrified silence. Passengers exchanged desperate glances, praying someone would step forward. No one did. The SEAL's jaw tightened, his mind racing for options. He pulled out his phone, but they were over the Atlantic. No signal, no help. Just a plane full of frightened people and 2 unconscious pilots. Then he switched to a different tone, one Elena knew well: military shorthand, the language of operators in crisis. "Who can fly this bird? I need a pilot now. Civilian, military, doesn't matter. Anyone with stick time, step up." The words "fly this bird" hit Elena like a jolt. That wasn't civilian talk. It was the kind of phrase you heard in combat, when lives hung on split-second decisions. Her heart pounded. Her hands, steady in her lap for hours, now clenched the armrests. Every fiber of her screamed to act, but doubt crept in. She was off duty, trying to leave that life behind, even just for a week. Could her helicopter skills translate to a 737? What if she made it worse? The SEAL moved through the aisle, his eyes searching faces for a spark of recognition. "Come on, we've got maybe 20 minutes before descent. This plane won't land itself, and fuel won't last forever. We need you now." Mia, trembling beside Elena, whispered, "We're gonna die, aren't we?" Harold was muttering prayers, his eyes squeezed shut. The cabin filled with sobs, passengers clutching each other, some leaving voicemails they knew wouldn't send. Elena closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and thought of her team, the SEALs she'd flown into hell, the missions where her precision had been their lifeline. She thought of her oath, her training, the little girl crying next to her. Her eyes snapped open, her jaw set. She couldn't stay silent anymore. "Commander," she said, her voice low but steady. The SEAL, 3 rows ahead, didn't hear. She tried again, louder. "Commander, over here." He spun around, his eyes locking onto hers. Elena unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. Every head nearby turned, stunned to hear the silent woman in 21C speak. Harold's jaw dropped. Mia stopped sobbing, staring in confusion. Elena stepped into the aisle, her posture shifting, no longer the withdrawn passenger, but someone who moved with the quiet confidence of a seasoned operator. The SEAL's eyes narrowed, reading her instantly. "I can help," Elena said, her voice clear, years of giving briefings under pressure kicking in. Military aviator, 160th SOAR. 8 years flying Blackhawks for SEAL teams, hostage rescues, combat insertions. Thousands of hours in high-stress environments. "I'm current on my ratings." The SEAL's expression shifted from desperation to focus. "Night Stalker." Elena nodded. "Designation?" he asked, testing her. "Chief Warrant Officer 3, Elena Harper. I've flown support for DevGru, Green Team, 3 theaters. I know aircraft systems and emergency procedures." His shoulders eased slightly. Those details weren't public. She was legit. Can you fly a 737? He asked bluntly. Elena didn't sugarcoat it. Not certified on this aircraft, but I've cross-trained on fixed-wing systems. I understand flight controls, navigation, and emergencies. With the first officer semi-conscious, I can make this work. The SEAL made his call in a heartbeat. Good enough. I'm Commander Ethan Caldwell, SEAL Team 5. You're the most qualified person here. What do you need? Get me to the cockpit, Elena said. I need to check the first officer and assess the aircraft. We'll need someone to coordinate with ATC when we're in range. And keep the cabin calm. Caldwell nodded and turned to the passengers, his voice commanding silence. Listen up. We've got a military pilot taking charge. She knows what she's doing. Stay seated, stay quiet, and follow the crew's instructions. We're getting through this. Some passengers exhaled with relief. Others stared at Elena skeptically, unable to believe this quiet woman could save them. Harold, still in shock, muttered, "You're a pilot? You didn't say a word. I thought you were just shy." Elena glanced at him. "Didn't need to say anything," she replied, then moved toward the cockpit, Caldwell at her side. The flight attendant, her hands shaking, opened the cockpit door. Inside, the scene was grim. The captain was slumped over, pale and sweating, out cold. The first officer, barely conscious, was gray-green, fighting nausea. Warning lights blinked on the panel. Elena slid into the left seat, her eyes scanning the instruments. It wasn't her Black Hawk, but the principles were familiar: airspeed, altitude, heading, fuel. She could read it. She turned to the first officer. "Can you talk? What's happening?" He nodded weakly. "Food poisoning. Both of us ate the same meal. Hit fast. Autopilot's on. Course set for Paris, but fuel. Weather ahead." He trailed off, vomiting into a bag. Elena's mind raced. Autopilot was holding, but it couldn't land the plane. The first officer was fading. They needed to check fuel, monitor weather, find a closer airport, and figure out how to land a jet she'd never flown. Caldwell, now in the right seat, asked, "What can I do?" Elena appreciated his no-nonsense attitude. "Can you read instruments and follow orders?" He nodded. "Navy trained me on basic aviation coordination. I know navigation and comms." "Good," she said. "You're my co-pilot. Call out readings when I ask." She touched the yoke, not taking control yet, just feeling the aircraft. "We're at 35,000 feet, for 180 knots, heading 085 toward Paris. Fuel's at 6 hours. Weather looks rough ahead." She tried the radio. "Any station, this is Flight 1729. Emergency, both pilots down. Requesting assistance. Static." They were in the Atlantic dead zone, too far for standard ATC. "We're on our own for now," she told Caldwell. The next hour was a blur of focus. Elena studied the systems, asking Caldwell to point out controls, piecing together how the 737 worked. The first officer, drifting in and out, gave critical details: fuel pumps, flap settings, landing gear levers. Each fragment was a lifeline. Caldwell, meanwhile, kept the cabin under control, stepping out to give updates. "Our pilot's got this. Stay calm, follow instructions." His presence was a rock for the passengers. Mia, no longer crying, asked him, "Is she really going to save us?" Caldwell looked her in the eye. "That woman's flown missions that'd make your hair stand on end. If anyone can land this plane, it's her." Landing was the real challenge. Elena had never flown a 737, only studied fixed-wing systems and training. This jet was heavier, faster, less forgiving than her Black Hawk. One wrong move on approach, and they'd all be done. She muttered to herself, working through it. Approach speed, maybe 140 knots. Flaps in stages. Gear down at the right altitude. Keep the glide slope tight. Her Night Stalker training took over: break it down. Trust your instincts, execute. Caldwell watched her, his respect growing. "You've handled this kind of pressure before." She nodded. "Different bird, same stakes. In combat, you don't get second chances. You land where you have to, with what you've got." For hours in, the radio crackled. "Flight 1729, this is Gander Control. We hear your emergency. Respond." Elena grabbed the mic, relief flooding her. "Gander, this is 1729. Both pilots down, food poisoning. Military aviator in control, not rated on this aircraft, but maintaining stability with first officer's help. Need landing assistance." A pause, then a steady voice. Flight 1729, this is Senior Controller Martin. We're with you. Confirm your qualifications. Elena was clear. Special Operations Helicopter Pilot. 8 years, 160th SOAR. I've got tactical flight experience, but not on a 737. Need talk-down support. Another pause, then Martin's voice, calm but firm. Understood. We're pulling Boeing techs and our best controllers. Fuel status and position. They chose Gander, Newfoundland, over Paris closer, with clearer weather. For the next hour, Elena and Gander Control planned the approach. Controllers walked her through unfamiliar systems, descent steps, and emergency protocols. Her training shone through. She processed their instructions like she was back in a war zone, calm under fire. Caldwell called out readings: fuel steady, hydraulics good, altitude dropping. As they entered Canadian airspace, the first officer passed out completely. The captain was still unconscious. It was Elena, Caldwell, and Gander Control against the odds. At 10,000 feet, Elena disengaged the autopilot, taking manual control. The 737 responded smoothly, but turbulence hit hard, shaking the plane. Her hands stayed steady, her mind locked on the task. She'd flown through worse enemy fire, zero visibility. This was tough, but doable. Gander's voice was a lifeline. Flight 1729, you're handling it well. Descend to 5,000 feet, speed 250 knots. At 5,000, they broke through the clouds, the rugged Newfoundland coast below. The runway loomed ahead, a thin strip of hope. Turn left, heading 095, maintain 3,000 feet, Gander instructed. Elena executed, Caldwell calling, heading 095, speed 220. The final approach was a crucible. Flaps to 5, Gander said. Elena found the lever, adjusted, and compensated for the nose dip. Gear down. 3 green lights confirmed the gear locked. Flaps to 30, speed 145 knots. The runway grew closer, still too high, too fast. Elena's world shrank to the instruments, the runway, and Martin's voice. You're lined up perfectly. Maintain 140 knots, descent 700 feet per minute. At 500 feet, she saw emergency vehicles lining the runway: fire trucks, ambulances, ready for the worst. She blocked them out. Focus. At 100 feet, she eased the throttle, flaring the nose. At 50 feet, the plane settled. The main gear kissed the runway with a soft chirp, the nose following gently. She'd done it. Flight 1729, welcome to Gander, Martin said, his voice thick with pride. That was a hell of a landing. Elena deployed the thrust reversers, braked, and taxied clear, stopping on a taxiway. She set the parking brake, shut down the engines, and sat there, adrenaline still coursing. Caldwell stared at her. Chief, that was unreal. Elena gave a small smile. Just a landing. Not my best, but we're down. That's what counts. The cabin exploded with cheers, sobs, applause. Passengers who'd braced for death realized they'd live. Flight attendants wept with relief. Emergency crews swarmed, medics rushing to the pilots, who were stretchered off severe food poisoning, but they'd recover. As Elena stepped out of the cockpit, passengers saw her anew. Harold, still reeling, stammered, "You were so quiet." "I had no idea." Elena shrugged. "Didn't matter until it did." Mia, tears streaming, hugged her. "Thank you for saving us." Elena rested a hand on her shoulder. "It's what I do." At Gander Airport, the story unraveled. Elena Harper, Night Stalker pilot, had been the right person in the right place. Caldwell praised her to investigators. "I've seen the best pilots in the world. She's one of them." Landed a jet she'd never flown, in rough weather, with 150 lives on the line. The airline offered rewards-free flights, money, fame. Elena waved it off. "I did my job. That's enough." But the story spread like wildfire. Silent passenger saves Flight 1729. Her face flashed across news screens, though she dodged interviews. Mia's father, waiting in Paris, found her at Gander. "My girl said you seemed sad, so quiet. I never imagined you'd save her life." Elena met his gaze. "Just be there for her. That's all I need." As Elena boarded a new flight to Paris, Caldwell caught her. "Chief Harper, my team's going to hear about this. They'll want to buy you a beer, swap stories about the Night Stalker who saved a plane." She smiled faintly. "Tell him I was doing my job, same as them." He nodded, then added, What got me wasn't just the flying, it was you stepping up, no hesitation, after staying invisible. That's a real operator. Elena paused. Talking about what you can do means nothing. Doing it when it counts, that's what matters. At her new gate, passengers from Flight 1729 recognized her. Some hugged her, others nodded with quiet respect. Harold approached, sheepish. I thought you were just standoffish. I'm sorry. Elena's reply was kind. No need to know who I was until it mattered. Duty called, I answered. She boarded her flight, blending back into the crowd, just another traveler in a navy sweater. But the 150 souls of Flight 1729 would never forget the silent woman in 21C, the warrior who emerged when all hope seemed lost. As the plane climbed over the Atlantic, Elena reflected. She'd chosen to speak when it mattered, acted when lives depended on it. Her training had prepared her for this, not just to fly, but to carry the weight of responsibility in silence until the moment demanded action. Somewhere in Gander's control tower, a radar track of Flight 1729's approach would hang, a testament to the Night Stalker who landed a 737 she'd never flown, saving 150 lives without a single mistake. So what do you think? Was Elena a hero for stepping up, or was she reckless for taking on a jet she wasn't certified to fly? Should she have stayed silent and hoped for a miracle, or was her silence before the crisis a strength or a flaw? And what about the airline? Should they face consequences for letting both pilots eat the same meal? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if Elena's story gripped you, and subscribe for more stories of courage that'll make you question what you do in a crisis.